Hello everyone, it's JPL, and today I'm joined with...
Christopher.
Yes, and we're a podcast name in brackets. In brackets. Anyway, how you doing today, Christopher?
I'm doing okay. Not incredible, but not terrible.
Yeah.
Just gonna be a busy season.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're switching over shows, which is a lot of prep work.
Yep.
And dismantling work as well, I suppose. So, that sounds great. Amazing. Best part. Well, I'm also getting ready to do show stuff. Probably not as intense as you, but it counts to a grade. So there's that pressure. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I just had fall break, had the weekend. It was great because I finished my major assignments due this weekend right before. I planned on doing it during the weekend, but then I just did it.
Yeah.
Which was like, whoa, I did it. That's great. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, I just watched stuff. I'm continuing with Jessica Jones, second season. Because I paused that little thing. I got through that. I'm getting through it now. But yeah, no. This week we'll be talking about, of course, the big stuff that happened in Marvel stuff. We had an episode of She-Hulk and the special Werewolf by Night. What do you think of it?
Which one first?
Let's do She-Hulk first.
Okay. This is something I'm kind of thinking about. I feel like, it was nice to see the cameos of Bruce, Wong, and Daredevil, and Email, but he doesn't count for what I'm about to say. But I feel like part of the reason why it's so cool to see them is because they already have a character to them that's been explored before, that has the foundations laid out, and therefore they're relatively in character in the show.
Plus, they're familiar faces.
And familiar faces. Why I don't say Email is because he was barely a character in Incredible Hulk / a totally different character in She-Hulk. But I liked his first episode. Second episode, I kind of care less about. Yeah, I think that kind of speaks to the characters in She-Hulk in general. There's a few characters, She-Hulk herself included. I like one of the lawyers, but at the same time, I think this episode, and again, this is essentially my first time seeing Daredevil, period, to a degree, almost feels like an advertisement for his show, whether old or new. But while I enjoyed the Daredevil aspects of it, I just felt really annoyed by almost everything else. Now, there were a few parts that made me laugh out loud. She-Hulk's client tried to do the Wakanda Forever, and She-Hulk cringed. That I honestly laughed out loud. And then when Leapfrog jumped out the window and he was still like, ow, ow, being pushed into the ambulance, I thought that was pretty funny. So at least there were a few moments in this episode that made me laugh. Feel like probably the episode that made me laugh the most. So at least that got it down. The transition essentially to okay, we had to set up episode 9. Now, like obviously, like it was transitioned by Jen breaking the fourth wall, but it felt like there was no build-up.
Yeah, like I even wrote to you after the episode ended. I'm like, that's kind of an odd place to end an episode.
Obviously, it's the way that okay, so we got the Daredevil fans to watch this episode, so now they have to watch the finale.
Yeah,
Kind of
pretty
setup.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes sense from that
And
kind
then
of standpoint.
and then another point, the fact that our episode 1 was supposed to be episode 8. So probably it suffered the same consequence what you were talking about, like episode 2, where the beginning of episode 2 was part of episode 1 at the end. So that could have been part of it as well.
Oh.
But also maybe not, because still it could have ended with this abrupt thing. Okay, let's do episode 8, flashback to her story, and but I don't know.
I mean, something was their idea.
I'm not too mad about those aspects in comparison to Miss Marvel, because I feel like Miss Marvel's execution overall was really messy. Like,
yeah,
She-Hulk, while you can kind of see it, it feels peaceable and like, okay, I can understand what they were trying to do, but also understand why they did it this way.
Sure. Plus, like She-Hulk, each episode is by itself. For Miss Marvel, well, technically supposed to be a whole story, but it wasn't. But yeah, no, She-Hulk. I mean, obviously, I enjoyed this episode the most because Daredevil. I I watched his show when it came out. I loved the character. I love the actor specifically. I think that Charlie Cox did a fantastic job coming back to the role, and I think he worked really well with Jen as well. They had really good chemistry, and it's it's great just having good actors working with each other, which we haven't really seen that with this show, because I don't know, the characters are weirdly put together, or they've not really had the chance to just work off each other like that. But yeah, no, I loved seeing Daredevil again. I did also write you saying, like, I could see how this episode could upset some people, and that's just like very specific people who wanted to see our Daredevil from the show. Who, because there were some slight differences, of course, slight. Of course, he's more grittier in his show, in his fighting. In She-Hulk, he's a little bit more quippier than usual, like MCU quippy. There's even a point where I didn't like, where She-Hulk is talking Leapfrog in that final battle sequence, where she's like, "Hey, this is my lore advice," but then Daredevil starts giving his advice when he would never do that because he's in disguise. Like, I get it, because they want to have that little playful romantic thing, but that was not something that he would do, at least from the show. He's also like way more acrobatic in a way, which it's cool to see, but like it's not realistic. Some people were looking for that, but I don't have major issues with it. I think the actor just, even with the quippy nature, just did it really good, and I can forgive it. But yeah, no,
I'm not gonna lie, it felt natural.
It did.
Like, yeah. I have some other thoughts, but I'll pause there.
Right. But yeah, as someone who didn't watch Daredevil, what's your thoughts on just the character of Matt Murdock and just Daredevil in general?
First off, it's a breath of fresh air to finally get a good character in the show. And like I said, I felt like this episode almost felt like an advertisement to a degree. Oh, we got Daredevil on Disney Plus. If you like this character, we have a whole show of his.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing 1 in 2 years or 1.5. So why do I say that? Because I myself was kind of sold. Not sold enough to start watching the show right away. Because first off, I'm terrible at watching things.
Of course.
And second off, we got changeover. So it's not necessarily like high priority, but now
You
after
are
kind of
intrigued to see more of this character.
I'm more intrigued.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. I mean, yeah. Another thing to point out, the lawyer scenes. I didn't like it this episode. I thought, Matt Murdock was fine. I love him. But the writing just didn't feel like that would be something that you do in a courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's also pointed out that She-Hulk has been giving Lawyer Award of the Year along with other people, but she in this episode displayed being one of the worst lawyers ever by not being prepared for court. Because one of the first things a lawyer would do would be asking, what was your process going through this? Like, she would know that he put jet fuel in it. She would know what the manufacturer instructions were. She'd ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that she didn't, and they do that, of course, to make Matt Murdock better. But it does really show that the writers know nothing about lawyering.
Well, I think also that for sure, but also like they did this to set up Matt Murdock's entrance and scene. I think to some degree that was a priority, but also I do agree that this show, like all the scenes in court, felt so unserious.
Yeah, and also just sometimes it doesn't feel like they know what they're talking about.
Like I don't know what I'm talking about as it relates to these things, but I watch this, I'm like, this, I don't buy this one bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a shame.
Mm-hmm.
Like they really just should have hired just one person who knew about lawyers to come in to look at their scripts and be like, okay, here's my advice, do this, and it'd be so much better. And it's a shame that they had to like limit lawyering to just such a small amount of the show, because the most of the show is just nothing worth watching, kind of. Yeah. Anything to add to that point?
There's been not a lot. There's been some discussion, that people are being, I believe it's misogynistic. I think that's the term.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that She-Hulk is bad or whatever. That's not the case. This is just a bad show. It's a bad show. And it's really sad that, especially if you want to champion female voices, that the female content is getting the worst treatment. Black Widow, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk are female entries of this year, and they are among my least favorite projects of Phase 4. It's not because they're women, they're just not done well.
They're not written or portrayed in a way that's appealing.
Yeah.
Or even heroic.
Yeah.
Which is the contrast that I'm watching Jessica Jones, of course, and going through that. Jessica Jones, I believe, is the first female Marvel character to have a solo project, or it could be Agent Carter. It's one of those two. But Jessica Jones is such a flawed character. That she's drunk, she's an alcoholic, she's not good with people, she's just terrible. But she's interesting as a character. And you compare it to all the other characters who are just, they're perfect.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have many flaws, and nothing bad could happen to it, which is, I don't know. I feel more inclined to watch Jessica Jones because there's just more to her story and character versus just someone who's just flawless.
I find it intriguing that with She-Hulk, she
Flawless,
is not flawless, but
quote unquote flawless, I should say.
I feel like her only flawlessness is the fact that she is. Well, this next episode is going to exploit her flaws as a Hulk, but like, but I don't know, her story, her portrayal, not in terms of the actor. I like the actor. I like the actors of both She-Hulk and Miss Marvel. Just saying.
But the writing just doesn't.
The portrayal in writing, no. I felt even in this episode with Daredevil, just moments where I just felt so annoyed. I'm just like, half the times I'm like, I'm enjoying Daredevil, and half the times I'm just like, I wanna, I don't know, throw a fit.
Sure.
And just at the very least, don't make it cringy. If you're gonna write a bad show, don't let it be cringe. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This show relies so much on cringe comedy, and I know it has its audience.
Like the cringe comedy is good.
The Office,
but like an over too much of it is not great. A little bit here and there that's well set up is great, but just if the entire show is just cringe comedy, there's no substance to it. It's just cringe.
This is She-Hulk is going down as potentially my least favorite Marvel project.
Yeah, I still say Miss Marvel for me right now, just because story structure is terrible in that show.
Story structure is terrible, but at least it's not full of cringe at every corner. There are some cringe moments in Miss Marvel, yes, but it's not like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? How I feel about She-Hulk.
I can see myself rewatching episodes of She-Hulk, not the entire show.
But also, She-Hulk is like specifically Daredevil. I could just watch the one episode. Like She-Hulk is the only show, maybe except for WandaVision, of these Disney Plus shows where you could just watch a one-off episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which is why I think it works for what it is. But yeah, no, there's a lot of just missed quality here. Yeah. Touching back on Daredevil, you had mentioned something in your reply to me that I kind of, you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that does make sense. Do you want to ask me what you wrote? Tell me what you wrote.
I essentially says, I guess Catholics are okay with premarital sex.
This one is.
Yeah, that's what you said. I wanted to kind of phrase it in a way that was more like, oh, so Catholics are okay having sex with someone they met within 24 hours or something like that. I couldn't phrase it in a...
I get you. But especially since being Catholic is something that Matt struggles with, because he's constantly he's struggling with his morality of like I can't kill, and I should I be going out beating up criminals? Like he struggles with his thoughts. Like the first season, especially, he has a big struggle with his faith. He constantly questions his actions, which I think is really great and unique for a character we haven't seen. But you often forget about that premarital sex aspect because it's just seen so much everywhere that you forget. I mean, in Daredevil is with 3 different girls throughout the 3 seasons. Even in the comics, I think he was with a lot of people. So,
yeah, like it wasn't like the biggest concern of mine, but I thought it was just interesting.
it was interesting to bring up because now I thought about it. It's like, oh yeah, interesting. He goes to his priest to confess about his deeds as being Daredevil, but doesn't talk about I was with this girl that one time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
That is really interesting.
I love that show. Like, the more I look at it, and the more I like dive deeper into just the character and his morality, it's like, oh, this is interesting.
So you made a point about the writing of Daredevil in the show, and the writing at the show really makes itself out to be like canon fan fiction.
Yeah. I heard, I believe, like in an interview, the writers for the show say is that they don't really like comic books. Like they think, like they think that they're too cheesy, they're not great, and I think it kind of shows because like this show is nothing like comic book stuff. It's just
So they think comic books are too cheesy, and they churn this out.
Yeah,
by saying that, like you're almost like setting a high bar for yourself. Like, okay, if the comics are cheese, then we're not going to do that. But the show is the cheesiest of cheese in the MCU.
It's like the writer and director for Andor, except the opposite.
Yep. And even like the random little things like the Avengers thing, which I think the funniest part about that is that the Avengers account on Twitter actually switched to that. Or I don't know if it's still there or
marketing,
a limited time.
That.
Yeah, the marketing is cool. Like that was kind of funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's also like that's also funny because like I know those types of like fake merchandise.
Yeah,
I've seen them around. I'm pretty sure you've seen it around too in our days.
So like that's, but also like the inclusion of that feels so fan fiction like. It's funny. You know what I mean? It's weird and funny, but and then you're you're talking about how Daredevil is written. Also, the one little mention of there being a Red Hulk, I feel like almost confirms the fact that we're not getting him in this.
I doubt we would, honestly.
I was kind of hoping we would, but I guess they're trying to set up Thunderbolts.
That's too much money to put into that.
I don't know. It is. I'm intrigued to see what they're going to do in the final episode. Terms of story.
It's going to turn out fine because we still need to see She-Hulk in her golden dress.
Oh, we haven't yet?
Nope.
Okay.
I assume that's the final scene of the series. She goes out on the red carpet in her...
No, that was this episode.
No. In her golden dress. There's another scene with the golden dress.
There's another scene?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Because the golden dress was significant. Because, like, it's an iconic design for her.
I don't remember this. I low-key challenge you, but also I kind of don't.
You low-key challenge me to look through the teaser. I mean, I could do it.
You could. I mean, again, like I said, I am intrigued where they'll take the story, especially for one who hasn't seen the comics, and how this will potentially, set up the next Captain America movie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I don't know, man. I don't know.
All right then. So, Werewolf by Night.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of it?
You go first.
Me go first.
You go first.
I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked. I wasn't at all excited for it after watching the trailer, but just watching it, I think it worked really well. Like the story is just short and simple.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that we didn't have too much drawn out of nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a nice amount of story. It didn't need to be a whole film. It didn't need to be a whole series. It's just like, here's his one off. I think it worked really well. Choosing the the old classic style of the creature features back in the old Hollywood days was interesting, and I think it worked well with this style, especially the way it was filmed, the lighting, especially. Just I loved how they did that. Even just seeing the characters like Man Thing, Ted. I liked seeing Ted. He looks exactly like Man Thing. It was great. I loved it. Um, the only nitpick I could give is that once again, a red-headed character is not a redhead anymore.
One was
Elsa Bloodstone.
I know, but what you said another.
No, like there's a lot of red-headed characters when they're finally adapted are not redheads.
Oh.
So MJ in the MC was not a redhead.
That's a little different, I feel.
It's a little bit, but like there's so many
Mm-hmm.
that just they don't do it.
Mm-hmm. I'm a little upset about the MJ name because I feel like they set up the MJ in the MCU to be a different Mary Jane. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that it's not Mary Jane. It's a different character, and then they gave her the same last name, just like that. Just doesn't make sense. Anyways, my thoughts on Werewolf by Night. Like the first thing I kind of reach out for is story, right? And this didn't have a strong enough story for me to care about it.
Okay.
I think it is going to be one of those stories where, like Eternals, I think Eternals is more obvious from the get-go of how it will impact the MCU. But I think like Werewolf by Night will be one of the ones that you'll look back in 10 years, be like, oh, so that's what it was kind of setting up. And it'll feel like it has more weight. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like for example, the Bloodstone, we don't really know much about it, especially in the context of the MCU, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to see how that will be present and exist in the MCU, and then we'll look back at this and understand why the struggle was so important for these characters.
I don't know if this will affect the MCU. Like it could just be a one-off thing, and I think
There
it'd be
was
fine.
supposed to be scheduling didn't work out, but Blade mid post credit scene.
Oh, that's fine. I don't think we needed that.
But I think the intention was for this to kick off a new sector of the MCU.
Right, because I do believe like these characters do team up with Blade.
Mm-hmm. From what I'm hearing, we're gonna get more monsters in the MCU.
Nice.
So again, this is just kicking it off.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Going into a period that's not commonly known by people,
mm-hmm.
which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, that is one cool thing about the MCU, where so many of these things that we were or were not expecting to be, put into live action form. Like this is very exciting for a lot of people. So I am obviously like intrigued to watch what's going to happen and
Right.
such.
No, I agree. It's
Mhm.
not the strongest story out there, but I think it's simple and it really works for its simplicity.
What you were talking about, like timing, this makes me very, very, very excited about our future Marvel presentations, special presentations. Why? Because there is, I'm not going to say there isn't, but significantly less boundaries as it relates to time. Whether it's too short, it's too long, they stretched out the story, they cut out the story to fit a time. You know what I mean? Now, I think these will try to hit between a 30 to an hour 60-minute runtime. I think that would probably be the general goal. I do think so. But like for instead of like trying to stretch out the story for 6 episodes, or even with our recent movies, The Multiverse of Madness and Love and Thunder being cut for time, um, like like Werewolf by Night was perfectly take that loosely, but especially in comparison with our recent MCU releases, perfectly paced. Um, it didn't feel too long or too short for its context. Yes, there was a time where about halfway I was like checking the time, be like, okay, but in a general context, like it was very well paced.
Yeah.
Which felt awesome. Like, yeah. Um, I think a friend pointed this out, so I'll give credit to him for saying that. He said like he feels like people like this a little too much because it is different for the MCU. I think he has a kind of good point, that since this is fresh for the MCU, this doesn't mean it's a good product on its own. It's just so different from the MCU, and people aren't expecting that. I don't necessarily know a lot of, haven't seen a lot of things in this vein. So there's an element where, like, I feel like the MCU is very, like for me, and music, like Skillet is a very good introductory rock band for Christian kids. You know what I mean? And as you go on, you find like deeper stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whether musically or lyrically, I feel like that's what the MCU is. They're really good at introducing people to cinema. The sucky thing is when you see people, it's like, I like Skillet, and you've been a Skillet fan for 15 years, like grow up. And I feel like that can be the same with the MCU. It's not to say you can't enjoy Skillet or the MCU, but like I feel like it's a really good stepping stone into cinema. And so like Werewolf by Night can be a great stepping stone for people to find out more products in this vein.
Like the monster movies of old.
Like you would know, I don't know.
Right. Like monster movies of old, back when
Oh, monster movies of old. I thought that was the name of the series because it kind of like I didn't catch a
Yeah,
couple words.
no, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, you like this? Well, it's based off these things. Go watch them. So I think that is kind of one cool thing that this does. I am, in general, excited to see the MCU treading down the more horror um, side of things.
I think the horror and blood in this one worked really well for being in black and white because they could just hide so much without the color. Worked really well. Versus with color, I think it could be jarring, especially during the sequence where like the blood splattering onto the camera. I don't think it would be as good if it was in color. But something that is so good in color, Man Thing. My goodness, when the color started coming in, Man Thing looks so good in color.
Oh, does he?
He looked so better in color than he did in black and white. Because in black and white, I could tell, like, of course that's CG, but like in color, it's like, whoa, that's really good. They did have a guy in suit as well, but no, I was really impressed when everything was in color.
Yeah. So again, I think this is I'm excited for more special presentations. As again, we're getting the Guardians Holiday Special later this year. So just the special presentations in general. Definitely intrigued by the monsters and horror in the MCU that are incoming. Despite the fact that I don't love this project, it's a good. It's a decent Iron Man for this new sector of the MCU.
Right. It's also, I could say, like, this project wasn't long enough where I'm like, I had flaws with it.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's a lot of, like, MCU films out there that I feel like are maybe too long. Or just any project. If it's too long, you're going to see flaws. Because the more of something you have, the more likely you're going to see a flaw with it. And this being shorter, there was less flaws to see. And I think that worked for it.
Speaking of too long, the Black Panther movie is going to be 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting for someone like me who's not as interested to see the film.
It's wild to think that I feel like the best MCU releases of this year is essentially going to be Werewolf by Night, Black Panther 2, and the Guardians Christmas special. You know what I mean?
Very interesting.
Yeah, like I think the director of the Black Panther movie put enough care into the movie where I think it'll be a respectable project. But looking at the rest of what released this year, like I know some people love Moon Knight, but I don't think it's that great. And then Multiverse Madness is undercooked. And then
that's a good phrase to say.
That is really good. I'm very proud of myself now. Yeah. So it's wild to think. Well, so at the end of this year, we should do a Phase 4 ranking.
I guess so, because the last thing in this phase is the Guardians?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess come December.
Is Werewolf by Night modern, or what time did it take place in?
Okay, that's the wild thing. On the Disney Plus timeline, it's the last thing.
Okay.
I was legitimately wondering, like, are they going to put it near Captain America?
No, because the reason why I was confused, because there's a moment where they're sitting by gravestones, and I'm looking at the dates in those gravestones, and it's like, wait, what? 19 something something? That's kind of later than I thought this thing would be.
Yeah, I actually thought it was they were gonna like put it before like Captain America or something.
It makes more sense because her jacket was not typically that style. But no, very interesting. Something I've been thinking about recently is that the most recent projects haven't talked about the blip. And I say that's like, so how did the blip affect She-Hulk? Was she there? Was she dust? What about Miss Marvel? Was she or dust? Was their family? Did anything happen there? Moon Knight. Like we've really had like a deep discussion about it since
Falcon and Winter Soldier, I feel.
Correct, because Falcon and Winter Soldier, and WandaVision, because those blatantly talk about it.
There's a little bit in Hawkeye.
Even in Hawkeye, what happened to Kate Bishop? Was she there around?
True. They only focused on Yelena.
I know, and I'm really questioning. Like, did our young characters go through it? Were they raised in it? Did they disappear? I don't know.
With Moon Knight, there's actually a shot of one of the personalities' passport. I think that showed a year during the blip. So as far as I understand, Moon Knight was not affected by the blip. That is the one answer I do have.
I mean, I figured, yeah.
But outside of that, yeah, I understand that not every project wants to be
repeating themselves by constantly mentioning it, but it's still like a weird thing that nobody's talked about it, because that's probably the biggest thing in their life, because people still talk about 9/11. That's 20 years ago.
Yes.
The blip is even bigger than that.
Yes.
Half the world was gone.
Yes. That's a good analogy right there.
You could have had a She-Hulk episode talking about the ethics of the blip.
That would have been interesting.
That would have been interesting, but the writers didn't think about that.
Nope.
Quick
question.
Mm-hmm.
Andor.
Yes.
That's my question.
I'm still loving it. I think that this last episode,
number
5. So the next week is going to be the bigger one, the one with all the action. Because, of course, 2 episodes to build, 1 episode to have all the action. I'm loving the build. I think this last episode would probably be so far people's least favorites, because people aren't fond of building. But I think it works really well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited, because I know we're going to get some good stuff next week.
Cool.
It's really cool.
All right, so next time we talk, we'll talk about the She-Hulk finale.
Yeah, and whatever.
If there's anything else.
I don't know. I don't know. All right. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.